Good morning, and thanks for joining us here again today. We are excited to have you back for some more knowledge and sharing and real estate golden nuggets. So, as usual, we are here with host extraordinaire, Sandy McKay.
Thanks, Rob. Happy to be here again. Excited to do another episode here and share some awesome stuff.
Yeah, me as well. As usual, anyone listening should go over to our website, breakthroughreipodcast.ca. There you can download or listen to all of the episodes that we have recorded over the past 7 years. I believe right on the dot now, 7 years, Sandy.
I think you're
To
probably
the
right.
day. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not look how much more we know than when we started. The
7
goal when we
years is a long
start.
time, man. It's crazy. 135 episodes, which
Mhm.
I know doesn't sound like a ton over 7 years necessarily, but we were doing one a month for a while when nobody else was doing this, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, just when we started this, the goal was for us to learn from all of our guests, as we still do, and you know, just to be able to bring people on, smart people that know a lot more than we do, and learn from them. And that's still the case. And we're going to learn some more today. So I'm really excited and looking forward to that. But before we do, as well, people should go over to iTunes and wait a minute, we should mention our free gift on the website.
Well, they can grab that at breakthroughreipodcast.ca, the ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. And when you do that, of course, you get access to all of our content. And you'll never miss a show. You'll never miss the opportunity to join us for some property tours or webinars or anything else we got going on. So go grab that and get on our email list for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. And go over to iTunes, leave us a rating review. We really appreciate everyone who comes on and tells us what they think. We don't have many negative reviews, but when we do, we try to look at them, listen to them, and see if we can, fix things, get them back on track for those of you who, just have those little things that are bothering you about the show. But other than that, we really appreciate everybody's most of the time 5-star reviews of the show. It does help us get out there and get other people listening to us. So if you have a chance, go over to iTunes and leave us, your thoughts. Tell us what you think. We appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be here 7 years later if it weren't for the support of everyone doing that. So really grateful for all that support and happy to keep things rolling into 2021 with some more great content.
I don't know if you saw that, Sandy, but Zolo, you know Zolo?
I saw you shared that. Yeah.
Yeah. We got put on their list of the top 27 real estate podcasts as number 5. So that was pretty good.
Cool.
Happy to see that.
Well, we should remind people to go listen on Facebook and or YouTube Live as well, because we do host these audio for 7+ years. We've been doing it on video for, I guess we're getting maybe close to a year, 8-9 months.
No, it's got to be a couple of years now. Time flies.
So people got to go jump on there too, because you can join us live and be on while we're actually here, and you can ask questions live with our guests, and we'd love to see some more interaction that way. So make sure you go like our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and you can jump into the action that way as well.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, please do that. We'd love to hear from you while we're doing the show. Okay, well, let's get to our guest, Sandy.
Let's do it. We've got the amazing Nickey Calford here with us today, and we're going to talk with her a lot about analyzing markets, how you are able to invest in different ways in different markets, different strategies to implement, etc. Nickey's coming to us today from beautiful London, Ontario. Welcome to the show, Nickey.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, welcome. Okay, well, let's start off by getting you to share a little bit about yourself and your investing journey so far.
Okay, so it's been just a couple years, I would say. I started when I was 21. I started right out of college. I bought my first house, and it was a disaster. So luckily, I worked at Home Depot at the time and could be fairly handy, and renovated it up, and then ended up selling it and flipping it. So then I continued on that journey for the next 22 properties. And flipped a bunch, and now I'm looking at the BREI strategy, where I add some value out and then pull that revenue equity and keep going, right? So that's the process.
How did that first one look? How did you said it was a disaster? Why don't you tell us more about the disaster parts? Because I think we all learned from a lot of the failures really well.
Yeah. I actually luckily made money off of that one, which kept me kind of hungry and kept going with it. But when I walked in, the carpet disintegrated in my hands. We didn't need a key to get in because the front door was broken. The toilet was not attached to the sewage underneath. It just kind of like drained into a crawl space below the house. There were crack pipes in the kitchen cabinets, that sort of thing. So you can picture a 21-year-old girl that had zero experience with any of this stuff and kind of lived a fairly sheltered life. Started in on this and just put a ton of elbow grease in. I think the one day, it was super hot that summer. And so I worked all day painting and everything else. And I bought a kiddie pool because there was no air conditioning in this house or anything else. So I bought a kiddie pool and put it in the backyard, and I'd filled it up the day before. It was nice and cold. I was like, okay, I'm going to just finish painting this one room, and then I'm going to go take a break, put my feet in this little kiddie pool and cool off. And I was looking forward to it. And I go out back and the pool's gone. Someone had stolen the pool out of the backyard. And like 4 days later, I see this kid on his bike carrying my kiddie pool down the street. And I was like, oh my God, can you, like, it wasn't nailed down in that neighborhood. It got stolen, but ended up turning it around. And it's funny, every time it comes back on the market, it, you know, brings back all those memories of how my first experience with flipping came about. So it's kind of cool.
So you didn't keep that property, you sold it?
I sold it almost a year later. And I actually had it rented out for 6 months while we had bought a second property and we're flipping it. So because of capital gains, the way it was set up at the time, we had to keep that property for a year as my primary residence. So at the time, my boyfriend and I each had one, so we would flip from one house to the other and always keep it as a primary residence.
So what got you to the point where you looked at this piece of junk and decided, yes, like, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to take it on. This is not too much work for me. I'm ready. My first one has a toilet that drains into the basement.
Stupidity. No, I'm just kidding. I think the biggest part was my budget. So at the time, I think I made $21,000 a year full time there. So I could only approve for $65,000, and that gave me a total of 4 houses available in the entire city. So I kind of picked the best of the worst and was like, all right, I work at Home Depot. How hard can this be? I run seminars on how to do things and I can decorate and whatever else. Let's just do it. So that's how that came about, and turned out not too bad.
Did you have other people, like, was there influence as far as the flipping stuff, or where'd you get the inspiration or decide to go into that?
So I think my parents weren't flippers per se, but they always bought, you know, the ugliest house on the street. And my mom was an interior decorator, so she would make sure that the house looked good. So that was one of the things that we just kind of saw it growing up, talked about it, you know, always helping build things, put floors in with my dad. I had 2 younger brothers as well that we kind of all helped out with all these projects. So it was just kind of what we did. And so it wasn't totally out of my realm to be like, okay, well, I could fix that. Sometimes
okay, gotcha.
in my head, but
all right, so that's good. I mean, to have that influence growing up, I think is I guess there's like sort of 2 ways that people come up. It's either with their family or they get that like inspiration from some kind of a book or something. But it's nice. It's nice to hear from somebody who actually grew up with that kind of thing, you know?
well, I think
their parents were the influence.
that was the days before HGTV, right? So we didn't have that influence where a lot of people have that now.
Sorry, how old are you?
22 and a half.
65,000. I was gonna say 65,000. That wasn't necessarily yesterday. Find those same price points. How like obviously now the price points in London that was in London, right?
Yeah. So that was before a lot of flipping was happening. At the time, properties were appreciating at about 3% per year. So not huge, whereas it's like 27, 28% now. But it was a pretty steady 3%. So to get any good profits, you had to buy properly back then. Luckily, I lucked out on that one. I sold it a year later. I think I made $11,000, which was pretty good considering it was a $61,000 property, and just rolled it into the next one. So that property actually came up, I want to say less than 6 months ago again, and it was priced at 250. I think it sold for 270. So.
And what is that? Is that like a single family townhouse?
No, it was a single family house, 2 bedrooms. The basement you had to like bend right over just to get down to the stairs. We could hardly get the washer and dryer down in there, but it worked. But it's just a cutesy little house. It still has the same flooring I installed in it. It still has, the same fences and stuff that were there. So it's kind of interesting how it's appreciated without them doing a whole lot since.
Cool.
Kind of is like, okay, you should have just held on to it. Never sell anything because it's going to appreciate over time, right?
Well, we talk a lot about that in terms of like flipping versus holding, and the real wealth is always really in the holding the properties. And yeah, you can make quick cash and it's okay, but that tends to go away pretty fast. Typically, even if you make it, it tends to disappear really fast for most people. Yeah. And so the long-term really strategy in real estate to me is always just finding a way to hold them long-term, and just forced savings. It's just forced, and the appreciation goes up and down over time, but you get years like this past year or 2017 or other years where it just makes such a huge difference to your wealth. And yeah, you've used multiple strategies over the years, but you would have done a lot of flips, right? Has that been something you think that was the right strategy for you at the time, or what do you feel about your journey doing all those flips?
I think I didn't really have a whole lot of guidance. There wasn't the podcast. There wasn't the internet presence wasn't there back then. When there were dinosaurs and that sort of thing that we hid from. But so I think I did what I could with the income level that we had. And it was I think the big change came about 5 or 6 years ago, where it was like, okay, the mindset was I always had to use my own money. I always had to use my income to get approved on these properties. And it was my primary residence all of the time. So you were really limited to, the full-time hours as a full-time job versus, being able to invest and everything else. So it was really limited to my income level. Whereas the last couple of years, it's looking at how to leverage things and use properties to grow that wealth and partner with people and look at different strategies and burr the property out. So get that equity and put it into something else. So I think in the last 5 years, my mindset has grown into that investment so much more than it did for the, just 2 years before that.
So what about your journey beyond just the actual investment side of things? What's been your path to transitioning now as basically full-time in real estate? How did that journey look from going from Home Depot life, 21,000 you mentioned, to what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I had a career. I was a single mom and I had a really good career. I worked for Union Gas for a long time. Benefits, pension, all sorts of good benefits of having that good career. But it just didn't fit inside my life. So I was a certified home stager, and I was flipping houses on the side. I always had like a side gig going on. And it got to the point where that was really holding me back. I couldn't, there's just only so much time in a day, and I couldn't spend 8 hours there, be a mom and flip houses and run a business and that sort of thing. So it looked at it, and it was really, as much as that was a great income and security, it was really holding me back to get forward in the goals. So I ended up getting my real estate license, learning more about it, being able to do that. And when I looked at what my career was, I actually dropped that back to part-time at Union Gas and did real estate full-time. It took that dropping to look at that time that I was spending at Union Gas, it was actually costing me more money than what I was making there. When I looked at what I could be doing, and everything else kind of fit together, staging, flipping houses and buying investment properties and a real estate license all work together, whereas Union Gas was actually working against me. Mm-hmm. So I looked at, okay, how do I replace that income, put that in the bank? And then once that year income was in the bank, I dropped it and jumped in to real estate full-time with 2 feet. So, and then today things are completely different. It doesn't scare me to work in real estate and be, 100% in the way it did when I first started looking at it.
That's great. Now, we sort of skimmed by. I wanted to talk a little more about, first of all, congratulations on that. That's a big accomplishment. So I don't want to just graze over that. We talk to so many people that do this. It almost seems normal to me now to hear that. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. Like everybody's doing that we talk to. Come on, but but it is a huge deal, and it's something to absolutely stop and think about, and like what an accomplishment that is to just be able to jump into real estate full time and leave that other career behind. I think a lot of people have that goal, but not everybody's, I guess not. Some people have too much fear to take that extra step and go ahead and take the leap. And I would say you did it the smart way. You saved up some money, you saved up that year of salary, and then took the jump. So congratulations.
Thanks.
That's huge. I wanted to talk more about what strategies you're using now, though.
So right now, and I work with a ton of investors through what we do. And I constantly get people like, oh, you know what, tell me about flips, how to get into flip markets. And right now, London, as well as most of Ontario, isn't the market to flip properties in. And so I've made the switch to more of that BREI strategy because it's a great market to BREI things in. You buy it right, you take those tenants out, you renovate it, and then refinance it and hold it, and then take that refinance money and repeat it into the next property. So that works because the appreciation is there, as well as the renovation costs, and the rental rates have gone up quite a bit from over the last few years. So you're winning threefold there, and keeping that property long-term, which, talking about my first property, is the way to go anyways, and being able to refinance and buy more really works out. So that's kind of what we're suggesting right now in today's market, because we are seeing such a great appreciation. So if you can buy right, that's what the plan is now.
So what about what about for flippers who were curious your thought on it? Because I kind of agree it's a tough market in most cases for flipping, but what if the market keeps going up like it does? Then you can always benefit from the appreciation there, right?
Yeah.
As part of that flip process over 6 months a year.
So basically what we're looking at now, so if a house is listed at $500,000 and the aftermarket rental value is $650,000, we're basically knowing that it needs $150,000 worth of work done. So if you were just to do that work, buy it at $500,000, put the $150,000 in, the market right now shows the comps at $650,000. So there's no room for profit unless between the time you buy it and the time you put it back up on the market, there's a huge appreciation. And that's where, but that's a speculation, that's a risk. So if something happens with the market and you don't get a huge appreciation, then you're going to have to hold it for longer.
Mm-hmm.
Still can be a benefit, but it's riskier now in this market than it was before.
Well, I've always kind of said to people that ask me about flipping, it's like, if that's going to be your full-time job, you're going to go to that job site and that's going to be where you make your active income, then go nuts. Like that's great. Take the money that you make from that and buy an investment property to keep. And then, that's your day job. That's fine. But I think if somebody is looking at it as an investment strategy, like really it's, that it's fleeting. It's very fleeting, right? There's no wealth building in flipping per se.
Yeah.
So
it's a career kind of like day job. Exactly.
And you have to have some sort of you need to have some sort of cost cutting version there. You need to do some work yourself or something. And or else it's very, 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 very tough to, obviously there's just that risk. Like you said, just the appreciation. As long as the appreciation's there, I guess it's okay. But that's a lot to rely on, because we've seen markets obviously go up and down, and it's not always going to be there. What about any other challenges in the market currently? Like what else are you seeing for investors right now, given obviously pandemic type of life and things like that going on? What other challenges are out there?
So, I mean, pandemic wise, showing properties and tenants can be a pain. We're seeing a lot of that as investors are looking at landlord tenant board issues and that sort of thing that are long term, like have been happening for months on end. But I think there's an opportunity in that when you find those properties that, maybe do have the tenants that haven't paid rent in a long time, you can kind of step in there. And if you've got the wherewithal to fight through that, you can pick up some really good deals on that, whether it's condos or single families. That sort of thing right now is maybe the bonus to that negative side of the pandemic for an investor. The other thing we're seeing is a really low inventory rate right now. So investors that are looking to buy, if they're starting out, maybe they're going to be competing against more first-time home buyers. So if they're looking at buying condos or single family houses to rent, that's going to be a real challenge because there's so few inventory in that, and you're competing with everyone in the market, versus where if you go to triplexes or bigger multi-units that need work that you can kind of renovate out, there's a little bit easier path to do that. So it really depends on where you are in your kind of investment journey that way, I think.
Yeah, seeking out landlords maybe that are having some challenges is always an opportunity in that, but there's almost more of those potentially now, maybe even more so as we continue into 2021 with landlords that are struggling or having issues that they don't want to deal with and maybe get a little sick of things. And it's also really tough to list those properties, really, because it's tough to get people through, like you mentioned, right? So having showing challenges and everything is ultimately potentially, in the right scenario, maybe a situation that's maybe can lead to some sort of a reasonable deal or a better deal than maybe you'd find otherwise. Maybe certainly better compared to like a really simple, easy purchase today where you're going to get a whole lot of action on it typically, because it's definitely a seller's market. We
had one a couple of weeks ago, actually, that tenant refused access, wouldn't even let us go in to take pictures for the listing, anything like that. An investor ended up picking that up probably about $70,000 under market value, just because he was willing to take the chance. And I think he's going to come out on top on that one for sure, because he was willing to take that risk where no one else was.
What are your thoughts on where we're going with this massive appreciation that we've been seeing in the mortgage rates that everyone's enjoying now? Super low, all-time low mortgage rates. Like, what is your prediction going into next year?
Well, I think there's a whole lot. I think it's going to continue on. For one, I know we're here in London. We're a little bit further out from the GTA, but with everyone being able to work from home, our demand has increased. So the appreciation is going to continue going up when we have such a low supply and demand is really high here. So I think until our prices are kind of more on par with Kitchener-Waterloo, Oakville, those kind of areas. I think we're going to continue to go up. So, and we're quite a ways off of their prices still. So I think we have a lot of room, and I think the appreciation is going to go up quite a bit.
Yeah, London's like and being a pretty big market too. It's like one of the last. It's probably the first one that seems affordable. I would say as you drive down the 401 there towards Windsor and Detroit and that. I think it's probably the first one that feels a little bit affordable still. Kitchener-Waterloo seems, I know Hamilton, a lot of people feel it's out of reach for a lot of people that are like first time buyers and that. Probably, I don't know if it's kind of somewhat like Peterborough, maybe, Rob, out your way, but it feels a little bit affordable, even though it's.
I mean, Durham's getting there, I think. But I mean, I feel like I'm looking at it from like I have an anchored type attitude towards that. I'm anchoring myself in the way that things were like last year. And then when you see this incredible appreciation, it's hard to imagine like being on par with myself when I entered the investment market, right? Somebody else who had been in it for 10 years might have been just pulling their hair out saying, oh my God, I'm never going to find a deal again. But when I started out, I was thinking, these are great prices. There's only up from here. So I think it's tough, man. It's all about perspective, I suppose. And I think that there's, I mean, if you listen to our interview with Dion Begg that we did a couple of months ago now, he explains that, look at it as your child's, nest egg or whatever. Look, not a nest egg, but look at it as a investment for your child's future, right? Instead of maybe even something that's going to possibly make you money every month. Hopefully it does. I think that there's still deals like that out there, but people take their hard-earned income and they put it into a fund for their children. If you look at it that way, it's going to return exponentially, regardless of the prices that you're looking at now. It's just, it's really tough. It's hard to say. But I do think that there's opportunities everywhere. You just got to look a little harder for them now, maybe.
I think too, people were really set on, I need this amount of cap rate. I need this amount here. And you're like, wait a minute, let's just look at the numbers. If you can just get it to break even, or even if you're $100, $200 a month into it, in 2 years, the rental rates are going to be that much higher. The appreciation is going to be that much higher. And it's going to go back to those great numbers. So people were very much like, no, I have to cash flow X amount before, and are now looking at it going, oh, there's nothing available. And yet people are still coming in and buying it, and they are still making money on it in the next 5 years. So you have to it's not a short-term, quick fix right now. It's making it look at that a little bit longer term, but you're going to make money. It's always gone up historically. I mean, there's these little tiny bumps in the road, but on long term, it's always going up. And anyone that was around 20 years ago is like, I should never have sold those properties that I had. They're worth so much more now, right? So just get in the market now is the key.
That property worth 250 or 270, you said now it's not going back to 65 grand. That's
no, not ever.
Right, it's probably not ever going back to 200 grand, let alone 65.
Did you make a little bit of money selling it?
Yeah, I did. So not only that, it covered itself for the 6 months. So there was that. And then I made some and rolled it into the next property, which we made 100,000 on the next one. So it made sense. It gave me that extra. I mean, when I started out at 21, I had $4,000 to work with, right, as a down payment. So it did get me to roll into the next one, and we were able to make much better money on the next one.
What are some other things to consider? Like you were mentioning there about even being maybe negative cash flow, but I mean, I agree. I'm definitely a big believer in cash flow. I think that's important. If you're building out a portfolio, it's less important, I find, if you're just buying one or two properties, right? And maybe you have one child and you're buying one property for their, whatever you want to call it, education fund or wedding gift or something. I don't know, but it's less important. Buying for cash flow, if you're buying 100 properties, is, you don't want 100 negatively cash flowing properties, but it all depends on your specific situation, right? And there's so many ways to do this game. There's not one generic path. There's not one generic strategy. There's not one great market that's better than everywhere else. But what are some of the other factors there to consider when people are looking at different markets or different strategies? How do you actually figure out I think a lot of people get lost in this person does it this way or that person does that way, and it's shiny object syndrome all over the place. But how do you actually figure that out? How do you weigh all those factors? What do you look for?
Well, I think it's very personal too, right? Like some investors are very just numbers driven. Doesn't matter who's in there, what tenant's in there, nothing. It doesn't matter. Others are no, I want to be this type of landlord. I want to have this type of tenant. And I want to live in this type of area kind of thing. So it's very personal, I think, when we're kind of looking at what's available. But it's funny, we're talking about the negative cash flow. I have one of my units, I think I'm now, with the way taxes have gone up and everything else, I'm about $250 a month in the negative. So it's a negative cash flow for me. But I bought that property 2 years ago. So if we look at, let's say $200 a month for $2,400 a year, that's my $2,400 a year I'm investing into that property. I bought it for $140,000 2 years ago. It's now worth $320,000. So that $2,400 a month or $2,400 a year that I'm putting in has made me close to $150,000 to $200,000 in
equity. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So is that worth it? What other investment can you put in $2,400 a year and come out with 100? Right. So that's when we look at that, and we have to look at people's comfort zone. Okay, maybe they can't do the negative of $200 a month. We have to kind of look at that and tailor each kind of investment to them, and their comfort zone and their risk reward kind of, right?
So even when a lot of people should start to look at it the way in that way, and a lot of people would say, well, I need to pull my money out as soon as I'm doing a burst strategy, I want to pull my money back out. But so most people set themselves up in being able to refinance, they get themselves into a mortgage product where they're able to refinance when they're done. But let's say it's that scenario where you were talking about, where you bought it for $500 and you put the $150 into it, and so now it's only worth $650. So you might wait a couple years to see that appreciation and still have the ability to refinance it once it's went up to $750. Right. So very, very powerful.
Yeah.
What other options are out there currently? Just find anything else? I know you're working on something kind of interesting out there. Why don't we talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah. So I have a really awesome property it's now 89 units. They've added in a unit as of January 1st. And it's basically a low-income housing building. There's 2 buildings on them. They're both less than 7 years old. They've got solar income. They've got really low expenses because they've got the rainwater recovery that does the in-floor heating as well. So super efficient buildings. And they've got these low-income housing grants on them. So they're in this program for the next 20 and 25 years. The city has given this forgivable loan basically on these properties. And the plan is the city wants to keep them in the low-income housing program. So when those ones are close to their expiration, they're looking at doing another influx of about $100,000 per door. So when you've got 89 doors, and I think 86 of them are in the program, you're looking at another $8.6 million cash flow lump sum put into these properties. So it's a long-term, when we talk about buy and hold, this is that long-term property. So it's got, a bunch of different options with it where, you let this low income housing grant kind of end and slowly switch it over into market rents that would be, by that point, probably 3 or 4 times what they are right now. So if you're, it's making money now. I think it makes close to $450,000 a year profit right now. You're looking at putting it into regular market rents. Your rent is going to go up and your income is going to go way up. The other option is you could probably sell it off as condos. And right now we look at each one of those doors is probably over $200,000 per door if you condoized it. So right now, even that market value puts it at about 17 mil. And then the other option is to take on the low income housing grant and just take in that extra 8.6 million at that end date and continue doing what you're doing. So right now it's listed at 10.5 million. It's a really cool opportunity, and we don't see a ton of these buildings. I think we'll see more as the housing shortage continues on, but it's a really kind of interesting way to have this really cool building and have a lot of passive kind of income coming through.
That's an interesting opportunity that those don't come up very often, but there is a lot of low income housing grants and things like that going on in different cities across Canada. I'm sure, definitely. I know in Hamilton as well, similar sort of, not a lot of opportunities like that come up necessarily, but there's similar things going on definitely in the market. And can you explain a little more about what that actually, what does that look like in terms of the rents? Are they a certain percentage of fair market, or how does that work?
Yeah, so depending on the city and the contract that they put on, the rentals are set at between 50 and 60% of market rents. So if they say, okay, a 1-bedroom unit is $1,000, the maximum you can do is 600,000 or 650. So at 650, you can go up with the market rent increase every year, but it's set. The original start point is at that 650.
I like the multiple not exit strategies, but the multiple strategies at the end of that term too. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean it has a lot of opportunity there, I think.
So that's I know that's the longer term outlook on it. I think it's obviously requires a decent amount of cash to buy something like that out of the gate, but there's a lot of money out there, I think, to put something like that together and purchase that. I think what is the negative side to it? Because it sounds obviously like a home run eventually, although it's a long way out. But if you were thinking about a retirement plan or a child's education fund or something, 20 years maybe isn't that far out. But what are the negatives to something like that?
Okay, so because of the low income housing grant, the way it's set up is that you can't mortgage it. It's already like a mortgage on there, although it's 100% forgivable. So you're not paying it back. It's letting the time run out on it. So you can't mortgage that portion of it. And if you do, it would be a third mortgage in behind it. So that's the drawback on that. But if you had other properties that you could finance, you could pull the cash out and put it onto this one. So it would kind of be a bit of a wash that way if you had enough equity in something else.
Makes sense.
Okay. What else do we have to talk about? What are my questions are cut off here. Sorry about that. What are some of the options that you're seeing in the market currently for investors? Other than that, is there any other ones?
Yeah, I think the multifamily burs are where I would suggest a lot of the investors are going. There's a little less competition in that realm because the numbers do still have to work. That's kind of right now, if you're looking for, something under the $10 million price range, that's probably where I would steer you. Anything like the bigger multifamilies as well. There's a lot of those right now that when we look at the title of them, the last time they were purchased was sometime back in the 80s. So if you look at, if they were 35 to 40, when they bought those properties, those owners, a lot of them, unless they passed them down into family, are in their 80s. So I think when we look at all across Ontario, there's going to be a ton of opportunity coming up with those properties that people are going to start selling off. And, a lot of them have older, because they've had them for so long, having super high rents in them wasn't important. So I think there's a lot of opportunity when those properties do get turned over to increase the value of them.
A lot of baby boomers in that crowd might be in that group, right? Which is a lot of people looking at doing something with them or transitioning out of the real estate game in some way.
Yeah, it's time to retire, right? That's why they bought them.
Definitely, I agree. I had another opportunity that I was thinking about, and the other thing I was thinking about too, and I just, because I was talking with a mortgage broker today, and I'm amazed at the alternative lender opportunities out there, and the flexibility that they seem to have right now. I don't know if it's COVID related or it's just the fact of the rates across the board are just so low, but I'm just seeing a lot of different opportunities. If you're someone who's like struggling to get financing, maybe because you're self-employed or you're you do your taxes a little differently than someone with a great looking T4. I think there's some opportunities to maybe look, or maybe restructuring your portfolio a little bit, or just looking at some properties that maybe you weren't looking at before because you couldn't get financing in a corp, for example, or you couldn't finance it because you show no income on your taxes, or certain areas. I've seen certain areas in Hamilton where lenders would never touch before, alternative lenders, even if they were pretty good areas. There's all that B lending group was very against it, and all of a sudden there's a few of them that are really, really itching to get their money in out there and lend it. So I think there's some opportunities in that a little bit as well, just with and I know there's a lot of people that are self-employed or in that bracket that struggle with financing at times. That is getting a lot easier. Maybe not a lot easier, but it's definitely seems to be some opportunities there as well.
Yeah, we're seeing it all the time with buyers. Like they've got some pretty creative stuff that they're doing to make these deals come together.
I'm seeing the rates like in the low 3s for B lenders, which is what, 2 points lower than it normally would be.
Yeah.
So you're almost like you're at like what we would have called historically low A lending, conventional lending rates, 3 years ago, right? So it's crazy. It's crazy the numbers I'm seeing out there. You just have to get in the market. I think that's what it comes back to is people need to be finding ways to get in the market, because obviously we've talked about all the long-term benefits of all that and having that long-term outlook, and some examples here today. I think like there's some element of timing the market in this stuff, but really you just need to get in there and stay in there. And what better time when money is so incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
And people are looking to loan it out, it seems. And ultimately the prices are so high a little bit because of their money and how cheap it is. And getting in today at 100 grand more than maybe a year ago, you're probably paying the same month to month or even less.
I think that's the main key, right? The interest rates are so much lower right now that yes, you're going to pay more because the market's gone up, but your payments are still the same, right? For the most part, your interest rates are so much lower that just don't worry about that sticker shock that's out there on the purchase price. Look at the actual numbers in behind.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that people need to take into account, right? Like the only difference is going to be maybe a little bit more of a down payment.
Yeah. A little more down payment for sure. But like, yeah, maybe the market goes down a bit. I guess that's possible. But let's say it keeps going. You're getting appreciation on the 100% of that property, not the portion you put down, right? So it's just incredible the amount of wealth that can be built through that. I think that people just more than ever need to get rid of that fact of, well, the market's really hot, I should just sit on the sidelines. Well, good luck getting in when the market's, if the market ever tanks, good luck getting in, because that means money's way more expensive probably, or it's a lot harder to get mortgages. That's going to be why it goes backwards, right? So,
well, and all the people that are investing now with the market higher are going to have that much more money when the market does tank, and then you're competing against them as well. So the demand is going to be 10 times more. Like it doesn't seem to even out in that philosophy.
Yeah, I think buy now and buy then.
Yeah.
Yeah, buy always for the right, if it's the right opportunity that fits your game plan, right? Your strategy.
How can you help investors get started investing or build on their current portfolio?
So I think that one, again, I kind of touched on it a little bit. It all depends on what their little niche market is, right? What's important to them? Where is their risk thing, risk reward? What's important to them? What area kind of, a lot of investors, it doesn't matter what area. It's all about the numbers and what they can kind of sleep at night with, right? So taking a look at sitting down with them and really digging down into their motivation and what's important and what the numbers need to look like. And maybe they only want to be in Southwestern Ontario. Maybe they don't really care, and it's how do we get the most money the quickest? Or my kid's going to school in 20 years. What's the best plan there, right? It's looking at the exit strategy and what the risk reward thing is now, and really digging down into that and matching them up with the right properties.
That's great.
What areas do you help people into? You're mainly in London. Do you focus on any other areas?
So right now I'm mainly multifamily based, right? So looking at everything in Ontario. We've got a team across Ontario through MRN as well. So you get like-minded agents that can help in different areas, but we're looking at the numbers across Ontario. So it's not just a little geographic area. It's looking at the properties that are right across, and what cap rates are where and why, and tenant demographics and that sort of thing, and looking at it as a whole, right, as the province as a whole.
So one more thing on London. What is driving, like you mentioned a couple things, is there anything unique in the economy there that's like driving people to go there versus a Kitchener-Waterloo or Hamilton or Montreal or some other areas in the country? Like what's specifically happening in London there? Because if it seems cool, I don't know as much about it as you do. Obviously, I think it's still a little bit cheaper than everywhere for some reason, but it's got a pretty diverse economy, right?
Yeah, so we've got like all sorts of different things. We've got 3 different hospitals and 2, like a university and a college. We've got a bunch of different larger industries like Dr. Ucker and 3M and General Dynamics. So there's different aspects of it. It's pretty well rounded when it comes to all sorts of different things. There's lots of great schools and parks and that sort of thing. So it's great. It's also just on the cusp of that 2-hour mark from the GTA. So the other thing that was huge speculation a few years ago, and I imagine it'll come back into play in the next few years, is the high-speed train to the GTA, which would turn that 2-hour commute into 72 minutes, I think they said. So that cuts, makes commuting, if you had to, huge. The other thing too is with all of those things, we've been put on the map in the last few years as one of the more economical cities to live in Canada. So with that and the combination of, being close proximity to, major airports and that sort of thing, it's really kind of helped boost our market and make it profitable. I think the other thing too is because of that demand, investors are seeing more profit too.
Is that high-speed train, is that Windsor all the way to Toronto, or is that just London?
So it's just to London, and then it'll go to Windsor, I think like 7 or 10 years later. So yeah.
So let's see how that comes back, if that comes back into the fold with the whole virtual world and less commuting perhaps anyways, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that, right?
Yeah, and I mean, COVID's changed things, right? There's a lot of people working from home now. They're where they don't have to go to the office in Toronto all of the time. It's not a daily commute. It could be a monthly, once a month kind of thing, or not even, where they are fully remote. And that's changed a lot of markets across Ontario. London's really been put on the map for that for sure, because of all the amenities the city has. It's kind of a little big town.
Yeah, and this has definitely freed up a lot of time for people to, instead of commuting, maybe they're running numbers and looking for new investment properties. And if that is the case, how could those people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can email me anytime at nickeycalford@kw.com, or give me a call at 519-636-5097. And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Nickey Calford, or Nickey Calford Real Estate Team. And again, you can always contact me through the MRN network as well.
A lot of ways to get in touch, and all of those will be in the show notes for anyone who goes over there. They can just click on the links and get in touch with Nickey right away. So thank you for joining us today and sharing all of this. Appreciate your time, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Sandy. How can people get in touch with you?
289-389-6846 or sandy@mckayrealtynetwork.com.
And people can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us again today, and we will see you soon.